And Christoph, I have my cell here if you need me.
Okay.
Good evening, folks. Welcome. We're so glad to see so many of you start to arrive in, and apologies for the late start. My name is Kim Schultz. I'm the Director of Interreligious Engagement and Public Projects here at CTS. I'm very happy to welcome you to the November Wednesday gathering, in which we have built a very esteemed panel of folks who are very excited to engage with us, a community conversation about immigration and around the topic of immigration, which we know is heavy on our hearts and on our minds these days. So we are very grateful to assemble this crew, and we are very grateful to have you here to join in this conversation, which will no doubt be an important and useful one as we move ahead in the days ahead. If you are able, we encourage and would love for you to turn on your cameras so we can see faces as we talk. We know that's not always possible, but if it is possible, sometimes it's nice to connect in this way, so we're not talking into abysses. And reminder of the chat, please feel free to put your comments, your questions as you go through, your hellos to each other, privately or publicly, in the chat. And I will keep an eye on the chat to see if there's any questions that pop up. There will be time at the end for a community engagement and conversations Q&A. Before we dive into all of that, I would like to welcome Heather El-Sayed, who is a PhD student here at CTS Bayan. We are very excited to have Heather today offering us a words of gathering. It's the way we start every Wednesday gathering to bring us into this space. So Heather, thank you for being here, and I pass the proverbial microphone to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with all of you this evening. Good evening. My name is Heather El-Sayed. And as stated, I'm currently a PhD student with CTS and a proud graduate of Bayan Islamic Graduate School. I graduated last April with my master's in Islamic Studies and also with a graduate of Rabat Academic Institute under Dr. Sheikh Hatem Regragui. This evening, I wanted to reflect on one of my favorite ayah from the Quran, from Surah An-Nur, verse 35. And following that, I will share the meaning as understood by Islamic scholar Imam Ghazali and why this ayah is something that I hold dear in times of trials and in times of triumph. Bismillah. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. His light is like a niche in which there is a lamp. The lamp is in a crystal. The crystal is like a shining star, lit from the oil of a blessed olive tree, located neither to the east nor the west, whose oil would almost glow, even without being touched by fire. Light upon light, Allah guides whoever He wills to His light, and Allah sets forth parables for humanity, for Allah has perfect knowledge of all things. Islamic scholar Imam Ghazali defines what he understands of this ayah to mean in his profound work, Mishkat al-Anwar, by first asking, what is light? I can't do his work justice, but tonight I'll do my best in the few paragraphs that I wanted to share with you. He defines light as that which is manifest in itself and makes other things manifest. The physical light reveals the visible world. The intellectual light reveals meaning and truth. But the divine light reveals the reality of all things, including self. In this ayah, the niche represents the most inner self that is a protected space of holding light. The lamp is faith, it's knowledge. The glass is the heart that can be polished in sincerity and capable of magnifying the divine light outwardly. The oil is the innate capacity of the soul, ready to receive divine guidance. The fire is the revelation of God and what ignites the heart's potential. What I feel when I hear this ayah is mercy, hope, and resilience. God, who is the light of the heavens and the earth, has the capabilities to be expansive beyond our imagination and without limitation. God intentionally mentions that the light is neither of the east nor the west because the divine light is not bound by man-made borders nor bound by time. God does not need permission to illuminate the world, but simply says, be, and it is. And that same divine light that can expand beyond boundaries and time is the same light that is capable of reaching the very depths of your soul. I feel that this is God's way of saying that He is within us. Hope is never lost. We are like the lamp with the crystal encasing the niche. Alone, the niche can light the way, but when encased in the glass, in remembrance and in faith, the light becomes capable of multiplying outwardly that can fill an entire room. The person who feels the light from within and embraces it, welcomes it, and doesn't hold it for themselves, but instead strives to be the light, transforms to become a beacon of guidance. What does this mean for us as theologians and religious leaders, activists, chaplains, academics, community leaders? I'm sure there are many moments in our lives when we've realized we've been called to this path. We can't explain the feeling, but it is deep within us to be the positive change in our communities. We are choosing to live in the divine light and illuminate the way for others in times of darkness. And even at times when our own light feels dim, there are others who come to reignite that flame, light upon light. To choose to live in divine light is an act of resistance to the darkness of the world. In times of uncertainty, to choose to live in divine light takes courage and bravery and becomes the virtue of resilience. And when we choose to live in the divine light, to receive it and truly live in it, we become the change we wish to see in the world. We become the light upon light. Unity then is not something only that we are building, but what we are revealing. May the divine light illuminate our hearts and souls that we may continue to be beacons of light in our communities, and may we be instruments of what is good, and we walk humbly beside one another, be the light upon light. Thank you.
Heather, thank you. Amen. I mean, thank you for sharing what could not be more appropriate words to launch us into this conversation. So breathe into that for a moment. Thank you, Heather. I'm very excited that Dr. Christoph Ringer, one of our most beloved professors here, the Associate Professor of Social Ethics, has agreed to facilitate and host this conversation. I pass it to you, Dr. Ringer, to introduce our guests and take the conversation.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Kim, and thank you again, Heather, for what a wonderful way to start us off this evening. So I want to briefly introduce our conversation partners this evening. We have Reverend Dr. Kenneth Phelps, who is the pastor of Concord Missionary Baptist Church. He's pastored there for 30 years. He has dedicated his life to both serving his faith community and society at large. He is a pastor with an extraordinary number of gifts. He is an entrepreneur, a community leader, a teacher, author, playwright, and he has what some people call receipts. He actually has his own production company. He's written books, and also he is a proud graduate of the Latino Policy Forum's Multicultural Leadership Academy. And he joins over 230 individuals who are intentional about collaborations and initiatives that make a lasting positive impact in Black and Latino communities across Illinois. In response to the recent wave of asylum seekers, Dr. Phelps founded the Home Away from Home Center, extending a helping hand to those fleeing war, violence, persecution, and political disruption. Through this initiative, he provides essential resources, support services, and a welcoming community atmosphere to aid in their integration into society. So welcome, Dr. Phelps. Cindy Eigler is Executive Director of the Coalition for Immigrant Mental Health. As a first-generation Venezuelan, Cindy brings to the role over 20 years of experience working on issues of state violence and trauma. Through her work with generative somatics, Cindy recognizes the many impacts of individual and systemic trauma and believes that centering people's healing and transformation are integral for our movements to succeed. As a previous co-director for the Chicago Torture Justice Center, Cindy helped develop a politicized healing framework, recognizing the many intersecting ways our systems of oppression cause complex and compound trauma in vulnerable communities. Cindy has her master's in social service administration from the University of Chicago Crown Family School of Social Work Policy and Practice. Dr. Fasika Alem is a racial and social, welcome, Director Eigler. And Dr. Fasika Alem is a racial and social justice advocate with more than 15 years of experience in advancing immigrant and refugee rights. Fasika currently serves as the programs director of the United African Organization, a Chicago-based nonprofit advancing social and economic justice, civic participation, and empowerment among Black immigrant and refugees in Illinois. In this role, she provides strategic leadership across direct service programs and policy advocacy and community organizing initiatives. And she's also an appointed member of the Chicago New American Advisory Council and the Illinois Black Immigrant Task Force, where she contributes to shaping policies and initiatives that impact Black immigrant communities. She's also the co-chair of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights Action Council and vice president of the Refugee Action Network. And she has master's and doctoral degrees in public health from the University of Illinois at Chicago. So welcome to Chicago Theological Seminary. And just to kind of set the stage and kind of for this conversation, I just want to kind of give our community a sense of kind of how this conversation and panel came about. And in some sense, it's rooted in my own, what I call political heartbreak. It is seeing words come from people that I've known for over 20 years about Venezuelan migrants that I simply couldn't make sense of. I was angry, I was heartbroken. I felt like I was living through a fracturing of deep coalitions that have been in place for a long time. And I found myself struggling. And I came across a notice for a workshop. And the workshop explicitly was focusing on building solidarity between Black and immigrant communities, debunking misinformation surrounding immigration, and connections between anti-Black sentiment and anti-immigrant sentiment. And I said to myself, I've got to get there because I feel like all of these are swirling together and they're very difficult to unpack in real time, right? And they're also very difficult to unpack when, in a number of community meetings I was involved in, when the actions of the city essentially make people feel betrayed, right? When buildings that are a living representation of broken promises become immediately available to others, it has a way of inflaming people. And so I was really trying to make sense of all of these swirling dynamics. And I was very much impressed with how Pastor Phelps and Director Eigler really came together to offer this workshop. And so I want to begin with them. If you could kind of take us into how did you two come together to offer this? What are you experiencing? What are you finding in doing this work? And how has it changed given the recent deployments regarding ICE?
I'm going to let Cindy go first, ladies first, and then I'll respond. But thank you so much for the introduction and for setting the stage for this conversation.
Pastor Phelps, and thank you for the introduction and for having us here. I mean, I think for us, really, it's how do we, for me at the coalition, when I joined in March, it was how do we make all the information that we've already gathered and all the information that we have, and how do we make it accessible to communities and actually move it towards action? And there was a report that our policy committee had drafted around debunking myths. That was a great report full of a lot of citations and a lot of good information, but it wasn't something that was really accessible to the common person. And so we created this Let's Talk Facts social media campaign and toolkit, and then a 3-hour community teach-in that could really allow people to reflect internally about how do these things impact, how have they impacted me in the past? How has it felt when I have been assumptions have been made about me that weren't accurate, or people kind of assumed different things. How has that felt? How would I wish people would have responded to me? Giving people a lot of information also, like what are the actual facts, and giving them all the knowledge that they need, and then putting them into practice for how do you actually use this in real time? Because it's good to know things, but it's different to put it into action. And I was looking for a partner for how to put this out into community, and I got introduced to Pastor Phelps, and it was like it was meant to be, peas in the pod. And so we worked together on further developing the curriculum to make sure it made sense. And we've been offering it in the community. And I think, for everything, and this isn't a surprise, but every time we've done the training, we get asked to do about 10 more or 15 more. It's so, the need is there, the urge is there for more and more and more, and for us to go deeper. And I think really, Fasika joined us in the last one as well. And I think for me, we've just hit a surface level. There is so much more to go into about kind of all of the different lies and the diversity of immigrant communities and all of the misinformation. And then how do we build relationships from there? So I think it's just the beginning of a larger piece of work.
And I think for me, I think in this day and age, teamwork and collaboration, I think is going to be critical to our success, changing the narrative. And so when Cindy and also Fasika came with their, to connect with me, to me it was just an extension of what we already did. And so I think we have to be intentional in these things, and I think we're trying to model in some way, shape, or form, how this actually work. We come from different backgrounds, and but this is what we must do in order to definitely create a narrative. So for me, it's what we do and it's what we've been doing. And so, and it's great. And I agree, we are two peas, so three peas in the pot now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Dr. Alem, if you would, your work with Black immigrants and Black refugees, oftentimes in our public conversation, that gets lost, right? Because oftentimes our public conversation is only limited to either Venezuelan migrants or immigration from Mexico, et cetera. How do you break through, right? And what are the consequences of that gap in our public imagination, in our public conversation?
Thank you, Dr. Ringer. Yeah, I think that's a good point, that we, Black immigrants who oftentimes find themselves, positioned at the intersection of immigration and race, the consequences of not being part of the narrative really plays out in detrimental ways for a number of reasons, right? Even thinking about the times that we're in now, right? The targeting of immigrant families for deportation by this administration, what you find is that Black immigrants are oftentimes disproportionately impacted by the deportation system. For example, undocumented Black immigrants only constitute about 5% of the total undocumented population. However, they make up more than 20% of those that are deported as a result of contact with law enforcement, right? So there is a criminalization of Black immigrants within our immigration system. And this very much, what you see very much mirrors the disenfranchisement that you see across Black communities in the United States anyway, right? And our immigration policies are also not created to support migration of Black people from other, from Africa or the Caribbean in their inception, right? So, for example, when even the Naturalization Act of 1790, right, explicitly limited naturalization to free white persons. Later, when they instituted family-based immigration, they intentionally limited that to, the family-based petition is where a U.S. citizen would bring their family members over, right? They restricted even those programs to families from Europe rather than, the global South. And so policy-wise, it's also always disenfranchised Black immigrants. And despite the fact that our numbers are small, it also depends how you think about the numbers, right? We are, particularly immigrants from Africa, are one of the fastest growing immigrant groups and are expected to constitute, an increasing proportion of the immigrant population. But we're also, 1 in 10 Black people in the United States are Black. 1 in 10 Black people in the United States are immigrants, right? And then when you count our children, that's 1 in 5, right? So that all of that also adds to the being invisible, right, in spaces. Because unlike other groups, you can't, it's also difficult to gather data about Black immigrants, right? Because the way we collect data, excludes the distinction. And so all of those things contribute to some of the challenges that we're seeing in supporting Black immigrants. Legal services is a big issue right now, but Black immigrants are disproportionately, their asylum cases, for example, are denied at disproportionately higher rates due to a number of reasons, including language access, low findings of credible fear, and also the lack of representation, which is the single most significant factor in influencing outcomes of any immigration case. So these are a number of the issues that we're seeing in the communities that we serve. And when folks were coming across the border and arriving into Chicago, there were also large numbers of Black immigrants that were crossing the border, right? In our offices alone, in a 2-year period, we saw over 3,000 people that were seeking our services. And that's just the people that we were able to connect with. So, these issues continue to be some barriers, structural barriers to Black immigrants.
Thank you so much for that. If I could, if each of you could answer this, so much of all of you have indicated how much misinformation, misperception, and prejudices kind of perpetuate forms of injustice. If there's one misconception that you bump up into it every single day, if there was one that you could kind of single out that really has a way of eroding our capacity for empathy, right, for the diversity of immigrant experiences, what would it be?
Is that question for me?
But yes, for all three. In your respective work, what's the biggest misperception that you constantly are having to push back against?
For us, and especially in the African American community, they're taking our jobs, they're taking all of the resources, and the government has just pretty much given them all of our resources. That's the reason why we are in the situation and that we're in now as African Americans. So basically, they're pitting us against each other, which makes it very difficult.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's too many to name in direct examples, and many of which I think sure you're all familiar with. I think the question that we always go against is, or ask and raise in most of the settings that I'm in, is kind of, who does it serve? I think that's the question, is like, who does it serve when our communities are pitted against each other? Who does it serve when we're in constant states of overwhelm and despair and anxiety and terror? And really the question that we bring forward at the center is, or at the coalition, is really like what would be possible if we had a little bit more access to well-being, a little bit more access to connection, what would be possible for our communities, what would be possible for our world. And so I think that's the thing, that we're trying to, it's not only like, here's a fact about who's coming and where they come from and how they contribute to the economy. Those are small things, that they're important things, but they're things that we can lift up. But it's also really helping people to ground in like, why are we being fed these lies? Like, what is the purpose? And so that they have a different sense of motivation to like really counter and to understand that they're being used and as a method as to move forward an agenda that's rooted in all kinds of terrible ideology.
Thank you.
Yeah, likewise, I think there are several to pick from, but I think the one that particularly over the last 3 years has really been nagging at me is the words we use to describe people and how dehumanizing it is to consistently speak about people as being illegal, right? One, it's not understanding how the immigration system works, because 95%, if not more, of people that are even coming across the border have had some contact with uh, the immigration system, right? They have been, at least there's information taken down about them, where they're going, if they have connections, and they've been put into a system where they have to still appear in front of a judge and make the case for why they deserve to stay in the United States, right? So, um, but more importantly, it's how dehumanizing language can be, and how narratives that do that make it easy to divide us, right? Because we have put people in a category where we're not even thinking of them as human beings with families, right? And basic needs like all of us. I think that's the one that's really been gnawing at me over the last 3 years.
So thank you so much for that. A couple more questions for our panel, and then I want to begin to open this up for those who are here. If each of you could give us a sense of, given the kind of moment in which we're in, as it relates to trauma, okay? What are the kinds of traumas that we should be anticipating or being attentive to in this moment and in the next year or so, right? I mean, how should we be responding? What kinds of traumas are you seeing, and how can faith communities be responsive?
Well, I think in my current situation, one of the things that, and I use this word in quotes, one of the things that I'm proud of is that we every Sunday we have bilingual and bicultural worship in which we have not only Venezuelans, Colombian, Hondurans, as well as African American. So worshiping together and being able to hear, uh, scripture as well as the message in their own language. And what I have seen is with the presence of ICE and the threats of deportation, is profoundly impacted our community and particularly our neighborhood. Many in our congregation and the community are now living in fear. And so some of them are actually in hiding. And so, I think that what can we do, and some of the things that we have done is start to do just like what you all are doing now, holding our workshops, holding our services virtually, right? So that we can provide, safe situations, so that, and we've also enhanced security. Um, we've also created transportation services, because for us, the needs of the community always shapes what we do. And so we figure out ways to provide food, provide resources to them because they're afraid to actually come out. And again, delivering food and and essential supplies to families. And we try to remain connected. That's another thing that I think we can do. We try to remain connected through social media, through WhatsApp, through Zoom, and things like that. And we don't presume that we know what they need, but we again oftentimes have our let's talk, not just let's talk facts, but just let's talk, to kind of understand what those needs are. So our hearts are like a blank slate, and they just kind of write. And so everything that you've ever seen us done wasn't our brainchild. It was actually uh, come from a request from a new arrival. And so those are just some of the things that I think we need to do. But again, I just think that this, the fear of deportation and what ICE is doing to not only just the new arrivals, but to also the African American community is traumatizing us and also criminalizing us in many cases. And so I think as faith communities, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. And so that's why partnering with organizations like Cindy's and Fasikas and others is going to help, because they're going to need somebody to provide healing uh, in the days to come.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the three things that came to mind, and also hearing Pastor Phelps speak, I think that one is like really not being afraid or hesitant to name the context. So oftentimes oppression and trauma can feel us leaving really broken, like something is wrong with us. And so it's really important, I think, in this moment to name all the systems and structures that are at play intended to cause harm, so that people understand the context, the political moment that we're in, and where that harm is coming from. So I think oftentimes, especially in faith communities, we want to be neutral. We want to, try not get too political. But in this moment in time, actually naming the context is a really important part of the healing work, I think. I think the other thing, just to mention, I think all people, all human beings are geared to always look for safety, connection, and belonging. It's not rocket science, the things that we need to be well. And so thinking about the ways that you can generate safety for community, whether that's in the physical space you have and having signs up, or whether that's in practices that you can offer that can help people feel a sense of safety in their own kind of being and soma, helping to make, Pastor Phelps was talking about all the things that they're doing around connection, helping people feel connected to community is so important, and helping people feel belonging to community is so important. So all the things Pastor Phelps described, I think, really celebrating people's cultures and where they come from and helping them feel open and welcome and having staff prepared, I think is really important to generating those things. And I think often in these moments in times, we feel very overwhelmed of like, we need to have the right resource, and there is not one right thing that we can do. It's like, how do we just enter into the moment and offer, anything that we can do to offer safety, connection, and belonging. And I think the last thing that I'll name is that one of the things that trauma does is rob us of a feeling of agency and leaves us feeling really powerless. So like thinking about all the opportunities that we can create in individual settings and in community settings to help people feel a sense of agency and self-determination and control. And again, those can be really small things of helping. They can pick the menu for the food, or they can pick the time or the agenda for the meeting. But like really thinking about how we can help really generate a lot of opportunities for agency and self-determination for folks too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very traumatic time, not just for, folks that are vulnerable, but I think for also people that are supporting vulnerable communities, right? The rapid response teams across our city, right, are really also struggling. And I know Cindy and the coalition does some great work in helping people, um, help themselves, as frontline workers. But the trauma of also being detained, I think, is something that would be long lasting. The stories that we hear about what people experience in these detention facilities or even in Broadview, I think are very traumatic, right? Not just the withholding of basic needs, including food and water and sleep and medication, right? But just the confinement and separation, and then the ways in which it is happening. When people describe, disappearances, it's really, that's exactly what it is, right? We recently had a community member reach out because they couldn't find their family member, couldn't reach them by phone, had tried over a week or so and nobody could contact the person, and they reached out to us. And we suggested just check the ICE detainee locator just to make sure that they're not there. And that's how they found out that this family member was detained, right? So the traumas around that is what I think we'll see later on. And I think the role that faith-based groups can play is in maybe being able to access people in detention. That used to be a thing where um, um, you could provide pastoral care. Is that where you go in and
Yeah.
you pray or provide support? And so I don't believe that is happening now, or that this administration is allowing those types of supports.
Right.
And so maybe there's some advocacy that can be done to push the administration um, to, restart those type of supports for folks that are in the detention facilities.
We're trying. I'm a part of Faith Over Fear. I put a um, a flyer in there. We're going to have start Faithful Fridays starting this coming Friday in the Broadview. And so in all faith, it's an faith denominational, interdenominational movement. So I think this is the right audience to talk about that. So this is something that we could actually do. But we are trying to get into, to your point, Fasika, we are trying to get in and provide those kinds of services. And you're right, they are being blocked. But we'll continue to advocate on those behalf. But in the meantime, what we're doing is we are providing that presence, on the outside, in hopes that it may move the hearts of those that are on the inside.
Thank you so much. I want to return to the advocacy question, but I also want to note, Dr. Terrell has a question in the chat. My sister is an elementary school teacher where about 60% of the students are Somali. How vulnerable are they and or their parents? What things can she and the administrators of her school do to protect them and their families from the traumatic implications of encountering ICE, including the trauma of separation? How can the religious communities act to create arcs of safety for these families or help parents of children deal with traumas? And some of that we've addressed, but I think there's a specificity around working with school administrators in particular. If you have any insights there.
Well, I would say at least 90% of the Know Your Rights and information is applicable, right? So that's why we do the Know Your Rights workshops. And then, of course, there are consultants that can go in and work with educators, right, as to what they can specifically do as it relates to that. And I also believe that I don't know if this is CPS related, but I know that CPS has also created a program, and I think the teachers union also has created some policies and some procedures that they can actually tap into. And there are lots of people that are willing to come and present to administrators and to staff in terms of what they should do and again what their rights are. And I think, as Cindy has already pointed out, I think there's also signage that we can also kind of put out. But again, I think knowledge is power. And I think that's really the main thing, is to make sure that they are informed as to what their rights are, and then to begin to train staff as to what they should do, and also security as to what they should do in order to actually protect the most vulnerable, which are our students and their parents.
I think it's just also important to note everything Pastor Phelps said is correct, but not all school districts are going to do the same thing. So like I'm in District 65, my kids are in District 65. They are really actively involved. They've put the school in soft lockdown last week when there was a lot of activity. They're providing all kinds of other support. You know, we're getting emails all the time. I think CPS is doing a lot of that as well, but I know there's other districts like in Skokie or in the suburbs that are not providing this level of support. So I think if we can do what Pastor Phelps described, great. If not, then it's like, how do we advocate and organize parents and community members to push the school to take it to make some changes and shift their policy to protect parents and offer more support.
Yeah, I think the CPS model is a good model for protocol to use within the school system. Um, if you're not familiar with, they have a page dedicated to immigration resources where you might be able to find more information. And then in terms of vulnerability, right, it's, it's not just with what's happening now, it's not just undocumented people that are at risk, right? With the Somali population, for example, while a significant proportion might have come as refugees and therefore they're protected. Refugee status, when you come, doesn't guarantee you, doesn't mean you automatically are a green card holder or a resident, right? There's a process you have to follow. So it all depends where people are. We're seeing people losing their green card status for one thing or the other. So I think if families are feeling like they're vulnerable, it's important to get the legal consultation to get a better understanding of their risks so that they can make informed decisions about how they move about their day. Yeah, so it's very difficult to assess generally the risk of a group of people, but there's so many dynamics.
And also too, I would even add that house of worships, house of faith should also be participating in these Know Your Rights sessions and having them. And I think that each person ought to have an emergency plan, for what they would do. Because again, as you saw, this administration, they came after comedians. They will definitely be coming after, I think, faith leaders. I think it will be next. So I think it's that we need to prepare for that. And so I think, it's a great question. What should administrators do? But I think faith leaders should be kind of following suit as well.
Thank you. I want to kind of formally open it up to those who are present. Are there any questions from the community?
I have one, Reverend Ringer, Suleiman here. I engage in this work. I'm the deputy executive director at the Council on American Islamic Relations, and that point of fear is something that comes up a lot, and it's also like a trust thing, right? Thankfully, the mayor of our city had really made it a point, to not engage with ICE here. But that's just one city. Our Black and brown brothers and sisters live everywhere, not just in highly dense populated metropolitan areas. I'm wondering, when it comes to narrative messaging, we have facts and figures, and we tell them what I just told you, but what narrative and stories have you been able to share with them to kind of curtail that fear, or to kind of minimize that fear in the communities that you work with?
I think the hardest thing about this time is that there is no curtailing of fear because the fear is real and present all the time. Like they should be scared. Like that's the reality, is that they should be scared. We should all be scared. Like there's nothing that we can do, especially when folks aren't following kind of the rule of law and due process, and they're taking people without warrants, and they're just ripping people from their cars or from daycare centers like today in Chicago. So I think there's really no rule of law that's being followed. And none of our normal systems and checks and balances seem to, I mean, not that they're not holding at all, but they're definitely not holding in a way. So I think the best we can do is like really affirm, like it is incredibly scary times right now, and we should do what we can to minimize harm or minimize risks. Maybe that is staying at home, moving things to the virtual space, that all of that anticipatory. I don't know, I didn't click on the link that Fasika shared, but there's a lot of links on some pages, which I'm put up in the chat afterwards, that, you know, have the, how do you prepare for family separation planning? How do you do your power of attorney? How do you think about guardianship? How do you have all those conversations ahead of time? It's really heartbreaking to have those conversations, but there is something settling to a system to know, like, I have a plan already in place. If something happens, there's apps that you can put on your phone that you just press a button that can alert your family if you've been taken. So I think there's all of these mechanisms that don't reduce the risk of harm, but at least help us be prepared for it and make plans that we have some agency about who will pick up our kids from school, who can sign up for these things, who can contact me or contact the attorney. So it's a really hard time to not be able to offer any guarantee of safety in any way.
And I also think that what I would add is what we've been doing is working with especially our young people, both black and brown, with how to engage law enforcement, right? And how to not only just knowing what your rights are, but again, teaching them, how to respectfully, right? Resist and in some cases cooperate, so that they can further prevent any further trauma, right? Or criminalization, because again, you asked about, there's also this myth that we can just resist, right? And that we can just challenge authority. And I think in this day and time, that's very dangerous. So we need to, again, I think, prepare, our communities with how to engage and interact with law enforcement. Again, that, as Cindy has mentioned, that's not playing by, civil rules. So.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Suleiman. That's definitely an area that we struggle with, right? How to balance not creating panic with informing the community. And I think the way we frame it is, a knowledgeable and informed community is a
Yep.
safer community.
Yep.
And then we're also encouraging people to access the supports that are available, right? For example, in a particular neighborhood in Chicago, for those of you that are from Chicago, in Rogers Park, for example, every morning there are community members that come out and stand at every corner, so that as kids are coming to school, they have folks watching, they have walking school buses, so the families can access these supports to be able to still, get their kids to school or get groceries. And so there's a lot of people that are willing to step up and provide support in this time. And I think, what we sometimes find is people are still scared to take advantage of those resources. So I think hearing from trusted leaders in the community to let them, to create awareness about resources and for people to take advantage and access those resources.
Thank you. We have a question from Zachary.
Thanks, Dr. Christoph. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Great. I have a question that could be asked to any three of the speakers. I do like this discussion, and they are talking a lot about this ICE enforcement at my school. My name is Zachary, and I study public policy down the street from CTS at the Harris School of Public Policy. I'm more in particular interested in environmental policy and health policy. However, I think this is a good time to be focusing on immigration policy. And while some things have been discussed at our school, I want to ask the speakers, if we're thinking about this issue on a policy level, if we could change one specific policy at the either city or state level to make immigrant communities safer, what would it be? And how could community members help to push that policy?
Maybe I can try. An immigration related policy or any policy?
Well, I do know that policy sometimes can intersect between different areas, but I think we are on the topic of immigration policy. I know that I believe it was in the state of California, they were either talking about or passed a policy about the specific ICE enforcers that they're not allowed to wear masks while arresting someone. That was a big issue that was coming up, that was being talked about over there. Not sure if anything in the city of Chicago has been talked about. I know there's many different things that we could be addressing with policy and law. But I want to know if you've heard anything on your end, something that we could be looking at or advocating for, pushing for on the policy level.
Yeah, we passed a number of policies just last week, actually, that attempt to address some of these issues. For example, we have a policy, and the package was, about 5 different bills were packaged together and passed through and are now waiting just to be signed by the governor. So these bills cover, one prevents ICE from accessing courthouses, and not just the inside of courthouses, but there's a term for it, like the parking lot, the sidewalk, right? That they can't make it's not something that prevents them from, it doesn't actually prevent them from being there. It prevents them from arresting people on court property. There's policies that, prevent them from entering childcare facilities or colleges, pre-K facilities, and arresting and making civil immigration arrests in those spaces. However, and then there's federal judge decisions that also prevent them from using weapons, the pellet rubber bullets and the tear gas and all of that. However, none of these, even after these things have been put in place or judgments or whatever have been passed down by the court, we still see them violating these policies, right? Just today, they went into, I believe it was today, into a childcare facility and dragged somebody out of there, right? So despite the fact that states are still passing these laws and are getting judges to pass down these decisions, it's still not clear how you hold federal agents or entities accountable to that. So that, I think that is yet to be seen, because my understanding is that if you, for example, deploy Illinois State Police to arrest ICE agents, that could trigger the Insurrection Act, right? And then trigger them sending the National Guard. So it's a very, and I'm not an attorney, so but even, it sounds very complicated and difficult. So I think we're yet to see how that plays out.
Yeah, there's another law that they're also trying to implement too that would prevent them from arrest without warrant, right? And that's another one. So I think what Fasika has said, plus that, and then anything that would prevent racial profiling, any policies that would prevent racial profiling or just arrest based on, your language or your color, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that both people have said, I think this is not a time where I think policy is going to save us even close at this point in time, given our current state of things. We're in really uncharted waters. And I think it is really people coming out on the street, us doing the narrative shift, working on that is really going to be so, so important. If you just look at the elections from last night and in New York City in particular, like what happens when folks come out and really move people. And engage on the people level, I think there's so much that is possible. And so, I think the more conversations we can have, the more conversations that some of us can have with folks who might not seem aligned. And I think Pastor Phelps always talks about the power of proximity, and how do we help build those relationships with people who might not see or look like us or think like us, so that we can help over time build relationships that can shift them and open their hearts in different ways. Like I think all of that work, that process work, that people work is everything right now, and is going to be, and making sure that we're sustaining ourselves and our communities as best as we can. In this moment of time, and continuing to tell the unapologetic truth about the harm that is happening to our communities.
Thank you.
Important.
I just want to echo Cindy's comment in the chat about when the administration isn't, just flouts all of these policies. I think it's also a moment in which communities have to really reclaim traditions and legacies of survival strategies that are part of our culture, but they really have to be kind of reclaimed and nurtured. And these are the kinds of moments that you literally have to survive, right? You have to survive these times. So we're just about at 6 o'clock. I want to just invite each of our panelists, if there's something that hasn't been said that you want to say that's just on your heart, please feel free to share in order to close this out.
Well, again, I thank each of you for being here. Thank you so much for hosting us regarding this very, very important topic. But I think the worst thing that could happen after hearing this information is that we don't do anything, right? And so I want to encourage you to all do something, again, I think we need to be more hospitable to one another, more concerned about our neighbors. And to me, hospitality is not charity, it's a covenant. It's how we testify that God's love has no borders, and that the need of the communities does shape our ministry. And it's our neighbors, they are our neighbors. And so if they're hungry, we feed them. If they're afraid, then we stand with them. If they feel displaced, we make room. We must live it. I think our faith tradition, Christian faith tradition says faith without action is dead. And so I encourage you to not just listen to what we're saying, but at least find a way to live that light that I think Heather kind of talked about, because I think we ought to be that light, right? Yes, God is light, but I think we ought to be lights even in this dark situation.
Yeah. I think Pastor Phelps has heard me say this. I grew up, I came out of organizing here in Chicago, learning like the Solinsky method, that you need power and you need people, money in order to get power. And I was lucky enough to work with a mentor over years that really helped me understand a different narrative of what upholds power. And that's Frantz Fanon's narrative of like power is upheld by fraud and force. And I think we can all see the force very clearly in operation right now, but the piece we don't usually organize around is fraud, and what are all the lies and the ideologies that are told that sustain our systems and that allow this harm to take place. And I think particularly for this grouping of people that does so much work of sharing messaging and narrative and shifting ideology, that work is actually such an important part of the resistance right now, and about will take us to the next where we should be. So really fight the fraud as a way to fight power.
And yes, and I don't have much more to add to that, but I think narrative shift happens, one conversation at a time, right? And so really encouraging all of us to be a part of that narrative shift. And that's how we're going to get through this time that we're in. And thank you, Ashala. We're also working with the Chicago Urban League to collect stories about migration and how migration impacts us all. And so my colleague Ashal has shared the links, and this is for anybody. You don't have to be an immigrant or a migrant yourself, and it would, you can share how that has affected you. And so we'd encourage you to please, share your story. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us, really, and look forward to, continued conversations.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your words, your witness, your encouragement, and the work that you're doing. I believe that we've all been really not only informed, but encouraged and blessed by your presence this evening. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.